You're watching your wife being led away by the most powerful man on earth. You can't move. You can't speak. Around you, 50 senators sit frozen, knowing that in 20 minutes, their world might end. This isn't a nightmare. This is dinner with Emperor Caligula, and what he's about to do will prove that the greatest monsters aren't born, they're built. If you believe the darkest chapters of history deserve to be remembered, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the stories that shaped humanity's understanding of power, cruelty, and survival. Now let me show you how one man turned an empire into a machine designed to destroy the human soul. How Rome's most feared emperor built a system to break the human soul. The senator watches his wife being led away by the emperor of Rome. His hands are frozen on his wine cup. Around him, 50 other senators sit paralyzed, praying their families will survive the night. 20 minutes feel like 20 years. When Caligula finally brings her back, he doesn't simply return her to her husband's side. He sits down. He pours himself more wine. And then in front of everyone who matters in Rome, he begins describing in graphic, clinical detail exactly what just happened behind those closed doors. The senator's colleagues stare at their plates. His wife stares at nothing. And he has to smile. He has to nod. He has to thank the emperor because the alternative is watching his children die screaming. This isn't the random violence of a madman. This is precision engineering. A system designed with surgical accuracy to destroy the human soul from the inside out. And the architect of this horror learned everything he knew by watching his entire family get butchered by the previous emperor. His name was Caligula, and in less than 4 years he would prove something terrifying about power that Rome could never unlearn. The story begins 30 years earlier, when the monster was just a little boy in oversized armor. The year is 14 AD. A small child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, runs through a Roman military camp wearing a miniature legionnaire uniform, tiny armor, little red boots, a wooden sword bouncing at his hip. The soldiers love him. These are men who have conquered half the known world, battled Germanic tribes in frozen forests, crushed rebellions with brutal efficiency. And they're picking up this kid, tossing him in the air, letting him command their formations. They call him Caligula, Little Boots. He's the son of Germanicus, Rome's greatest general since Julius Caesar himself. Everywhere his father goes, little Caligula follows. The soldiers genuinely believe this child brings them victory. When they march, he marches. When they make camp, he has his own little tent set up beside his father's command post. He's growing up thinking he's invincible, loved, protected by the most powerful army on earth. He has absolutely no idea what's coming. 1 year later, his father drops dead. The official story is sudden illness. The whispered story, the one everyone believes, but nobody dares say out loud, is poison. Ordered by someone very close to Emperor Tiberius. Maybe Tiberius himself. Caligula is 8 years old when the machine starts consuming his family, piece by piece. First, his mother. Soldiers drag her from their home in the middle of the night. She's accused of treason against the emperor. No trial, no evidence, just accusations and chains. They take her to a prison island where she'll spend years slowly starving to death. Then his oldest brother. Arrested on fabricated charges, thrown into a cell and denied food until he becomes so desperate he tries to eat the stuffing from his mattress. He dies, choking on wool and foam. His second brother is exiled to a barren rock in the Mediterranean. Guards torture him daily until he finally smashes his own head against the stone walls just to make it stop. One by one, they're erased. Caligula watches it all happen from the sidelines, powerless, invisible, surviving only because he's too young to be considered a threat. By the time he's 19, he's the last one standing, the sole survivor of his entire bloodline. And then comes the summons. Emperor Tiberius wants to see him on Capri. Capri is a beautiful island off the coast of Italy. Tiberius has transformed it into his personal fortress, far from Rome, far from the Senate, far from anyone who might question what happens there. The ancient historians describe Capri as a house of horrors. Tiberius has become paranoid, depraved, surrounding himself with astrologers and yes-men inventing new tortures because he's bored with the old ones. And into this nightmare walks teenage Caligula. He knows Tiberius murdered his family. Everyone knows it. But he can't show it. Can't even hint at it. One wrong look, one flash of grief, one moment of anger, and he joins his brothers in an unmarked grave. So he doesn't just survive, he excels. He buries everything human inside himself. He watches. He studies. He becomes exactly what Tiberius wants. Obedient, entertaining, harmless. For 6 years he plays this role perfectly, learning cruelty from a master. Then in 37 AD, Tiberius dies. Some say natural causes. Others say Caligula smothered him with a pillow. Either way, the 19-year-old hostage is now the most powerful person on Earth. Rome explodes in celebration. They think they're getting the son of beloved Germanicus, the little boy in red boots, who used to make soldiers smile. They're about to discover they've crowned something else entirely, something that spent 6 years learning how to architect human suffering from history's most accomplished monster. For 7 months, everything seems perfect. Caligula declares amnesty for political prisoners. He hosts games and celebrations. He appears before the Senate with humility and grace. Rome thinks they've been saved. Then he gets sick. A terrible fever that lasts for days. When he finally recovers, something inside him has shattered beyond repair, and Rome is about to learn what he's been hiding behind that carefully constructed mask. What follows isn't random violence or impulsive cruelty. Caligula builds a system, 5 distinct phases of psychological warfare, each designed to destroy a different part of the human spirit. And the truly terrifying part is how methodical it all is. The first phase begins with his sister Drusilla. Caligula has 3 sisters, but Drusilla is different. Ancient sources claim their relationship crosses boundaries that even permissive Rome finds disturbing. Whether the rumors of incest are true or just propaganda doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone believes them, and Caligula does nothing to discourage the whispers. Then Drusilla dies, possibly from fever, possibly from complications of childbirth. The official cause doesn't matter, because what happens next reveals the core of Caligula's methodology, taking personal pain and forcing an entire empire to experience it. He doesn't just mourn, he weaponizes mourning. First, he has the Senate officially declare Drusilla a goddess, not metaphorically, actually legally divine. There are now temples dedicated to his dead sister, where Romans are required to worship. Then he declares a period of public mourning, and this is where it becomes monstrous. It is now a capital crime to laugh. It is now a capital crime to bathe. It is now a capital crime to have dinner with your family. Think about that. For weeks, possibly months, if you're caught smiling, you can be executed. If your child tells a joke at breakfast, do you laugh? Do you punish them for being a child, and every moment of natural joy becomes a potential death sentence? Informers are everywhere. Neighbors report neighbors. Friends betray friends. The entire empire is forced to perform grief they don't feel for a woman most of them never met. Caligula is making Rome feel his pain, whether they want to or not. He's discovering he can legislate emotion, criminalize happiness, make his internal anguish everyone's external reality. And once he realizes he can control how people feel, he starts experimenting with what else he can take from them. The second phase is so disturbing that historians still debate whether it actually happened or was later propaganda designed to justify his murder. Caligula establishes a brothel inside the imperial palace, not for himself, for the public, as a business, and it's not staffed by common prostitutes. It's staffed by the sons and daughters of Rome's noble families, the aristocracy, the senators, the people who rule provinces and command legions. He has heralds go into the streets to announce prices. Different rates for married women versus unmarried girls. Special premium rates for virgins from senatorial families. And here's the detail that makes it specifically deliberately cruel. He keeps ledgers, detailed records, names, dates, transactions, specific acts performed, the bureaucracy of humiliation. It's not enough to destroy these families in the moment. He's creating permanent documentation evidence that will outlive everyone involved. In a culture where family honor means everything, where your name and reputation determine your children's futures, he's building an archive of shame. Fathers have to send their daughters to the palace. Mothers have to dress their sons and send them to service strangers, because refusing means death. Not just their death, their entire household wiped out in an afternoon. The ledgers serve another purpose. Their insurance. Every senator who visits that brothel, every nobleman who participates is now compromised. They're all guilty. They've all contributed to the defilement of Rome's aristocracy. Nobody can claim moral authority anymore. Nobody can organize opposition without exposing their own complicity. It's brilliant in the most horrifying way possible. Caligula has transformed Rome's elite into accomplices in their own degradation. The third phase happens at dinner parties. Caligula hosts elaborate banquets. Senators and their wives attend in their finest clothes, reclining on couches arranged around the imperial table. Wine flows freely. Musicians play. Servants bring course after course of expensive delicacies. It looks like normal Roman hospitality. Then, in the middle of dinner, Caligula points to a senator's wife. Sometimes he says something. Sometimes he just gestures. Guards materialize at her side. They escort her from the room while her husband sits frozen food, turning to ash in his mouth. The dinner continues. Other guests make small talk. They comment on the wine compliment, the fish course, discuss chariot racing. Because what else can they do? Every minute that passes feels like an hour. Finally, Caligula returns with the woman. He doesn't just bring her back and resume dinner. He sits down, pours himself fresh wine, and begins describing in explicit clinical detail exactly what just occurred, what he did, what he made her do, how she responded, whether she cried, whether she resisted. Her husband has to listen, has to nod, has to smile, and thank the emperor for the honor of his attention, because showing anger means death. Showing pain means death. The only acceptable response is gratitude. This isn't about sex. This is about power. This is about forcing men to participate in their own humiliation, to smile, while their fundamental dignity is stripped away piece by piece. Caligula is teaching them that they own nothing, not their honor, not their wives, not even their own emotional responses. And here's the worst part. After the first few times, the other dinner guests get used to it. They learn to keep eating, keep drinking, keep talking while it happens. Human beings can normalize almost anything if survival depends on it. And Caligula is showing them exactly how much they're willing to accept. The fourth phase moves from private humiliation to public spectacle. Rome loves games. Gladiatorial combat, animal hunts, theatrical performances. The Colosseum won't be built for another 40 years, but there are plenty of arenas where crowds gather to watch violence as entertainment. Caligula takes this tradition and transforms it into something much darker. At first, the games seem normal. Criminals fighting beasts, gladiators dueling for glory. But then Caligula starts making unusual decisions. Halfway through an afternoon of scheduled fights, he suddenly announces that the next combat will feature audience members. Guards grab random spectators and drag them into the arena, unarmed, untrained, facing professional killers or starving lions, their crime looking suspicious, or wealthy, or just being in the wrong seat at the wrong moment. There's no pattern, no logic, which is precisely the point. Anyone can die at any time for any reason, or no reason at all. But it gets worse. The supply of condemned prisoners runs low. Caligula solves this problem by simply expanding the definition of who deserves to die. Minor criminals who would normally face fines or short imprisonment are now thrown to the beasts. Then people with no criminal record at all. Just citizens who said the wrong thing, or were accused by the wrong person, or happened to catch the emperor's attention on a bad day. The games become a lottery of death. Attending is mandatory for the elite. Refusing to appear means you're plotting against the emperor. But attending means you might be the next one, dragged into the sand, to die for the entertainment of your neighbors. Caligula sometimes sits in the imperial box, eating grapes and chatting casually, while men are torn apart below him. Sometimes he gets bored and leaves in the middle of an execution. Sometimes he laughs. Sometimes he barely looks up from his food. The randomness is calculated. When punishment is consistent, people can avoid it by following rules. When punishment is arbitrary, there are no rules. There's only fear and the desperate hope that today won't be your day. The fifth and final phase is what ultimately kills him, but not before demonstrating just how casual his cruelty has become. His name is Cassius Chaerea. He's a senior officer in the Praetorian Guard, the Emperor's personal bodyguards. These are elite soldiers who stand inches from Caligula every single day, fully armed, professionally trained in lethal violence. Chaerea has one physical characteristic that Caligula finds endlessly amusing, a high-pitched voice. And Caligula, true to form, cannot let it go. Every day brings new jokes, new mockery, new humiliation. But here's the specific detail that shows how routine his cruelty has become. When it's Chaerea's turn to request the daily military password, a standard protocol that happens in front of all the other guards, Caligula assigns him deliberately feminine or sexual words. Venus, Priapus. Words designed to make the other soldiers snicker, day after day, week after week, month after month. For Caligula, it's throwaway humor barely worth remembering. For Chaerea, every joke is another drop of poison accumulating in his soul. Caligula has made a fundamental calculation error. Senators can be humiliated because they want to live. They have children estates, legacies worth protecting. They can rationalize survival as a form of noble sacrifice. But Chaerea is a soldier, a man trained for violence since adolescence, a man who stands next to the emperor every single day with a gladius on his hip and the knowledge of exactly where to thrust it. And Caligula has just taught him that life under this emperor isn't worth living. The machine has made a mistake. It has aimed its casual, everyday cruelty at the wrong type of person. Not someone trained to accept humiliation. Not someone with something to lose. But someone with nothing left to lose and every tool necessary to do something about it. What happens next takes less than 60 seconds, but changes the course of Roman history. January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula is attending theatrical performances. He's in a good mood, laughing at the actors throwing coins to the crowd. Around midday, he decides to take a break, heading from the theater back to the palace through a narrow underground corridor. Rough stone walls on both sides, dimly lit by torches, barely wide enough for two men to walk abreast. The conspirators are waiting. Chaerea steps forward as Caligula approaches. This is normal. Guards always check in with the emperor, report on security, receive instructions. Chaerea asks for the day's password. Caligula, completely secure in his invincibility, totally unaware that anything is wrong, gives one final sneering, mocking response. It's the last thing he ever says. Chaerea screams something historians can't agree on. Maybe, take this. Maybe, this is for Rome. Maybe just an incoherent roar of accumulated rage. He drives his sword up under Caligula's ribs. Caligula stumbles, tries to run, but the corridor is too narrow, and there are conspirators at both ends. They swarm him. 30 stab wounds according to the ancient sources. 30 times the blade goes in finding flesh, striking bone, releasing years of bottled fury in one explosive moment of violence. They don't stop until there's nothing left that could possibly still be alive. 4 years of accumulated rage, humiliation, and terror, released in 60 seconds of frenzied stabbing. The monster is dead, and that's when everything gets worse. The conspirators don't stop with Caligula. They hunt through the palace looking for anyone connected to him. They find his wife, Caesonia. She knows what's happened. She can hear the screaming echoing through the marble corridors. She's begging, pleading, trying to reason with armed men whose hands are still wet with her husband's blood. They stab her to death in her own bedroom. Then they find the nursery. Caligula's daughter, Julia Drusilla, is 2 years old, maybe 3. The sources disagree on her exact age. She's crying for her mother. A soldier picks her up, and while she's screaming, confused, terrified, he swings her head first into a marble wall. They have to eliminate the bloodline. Can't leave any heir who might grow up seeking vengeance. Can't leave anyone who could become a rallying point for loyalists. So they murder a toddler. This is what happens when the machine breaks. It doesn't just stop running. It devours everything connected to it in a final spasm of violence. For a few hours, maybe a whole afternoon, it seems like Rome might actually change. The Senate gathers in emergency session. Senators who've been silent for 4 years suddenly find their voices. Some argue for restoring the Republic, getting rid of emperors entirely, going back to the old ways where power was shared and limited. For the first time in generations, there's genuine debate about what Rome should be. While they're talking, the Praetorian Guard is looting the palace. They're going through rooms, taking jewelry, gold, anything valuable. The emperor is dead. There's no clear successor. Chaos reigns, so they're helping themselves to imperial property. One soldier hears something behind a curtain. He pulls it back and finds a man hiding there, middle-aged, trembling with a pronounced stutter and a limp that makes him walk awkwardly. Claudius, Caligula's uncle, the family embarrassment. Everyone thought he was harmless, probably brain-damaged from childhood illness, kept around because he was too pathetic to be dangerous. The soldier looks at him and doesn't see a harmless fool. He sees opportunity. He sees a new emperor. More importantly, he sees continued employment and imperial favor. The Praetorians carry Claudius on their shoulders to their camp. They proclaim him emperor. They do this without consulting the Senate, without any legal authority, simply because they have the weapons and the organization to make it happen. And while the Senate is still debating the theoretical future of the Roman Republic, the army has already decided the practical reality. There will be another emperor. The system will continue. Here's what haunts historians 2,000 years later. Caligula ruled for less than 4 years. 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days to be precise. In the scope of Roman history, that's nothing. A blip, a footnote between longer reigns, and yet we're still talking about him, still trying to understand him, still using his name as shorthand for depravity and madness. Why? Because Caligula proved something terrifying about power. He demonstrated that the entire machinery of a state, its laws, its military, its economy, its religious institutions, its social customs, can be transformed into instruments of personal psychological warfare. He didn't work outside the system or against it. He made the system itself his weapon. The ledgers in the imperial brothel, that's bureaucracy doing its job. The forced mourning for Drusilla, that's law enforcement doing its job. The random executions at the games, that's public entertainment doing its job. The violation of senators' wives at dinner parties, that's imperial hospitality doing its job. Every atrocity he committed was technically legal because he was the law. Every horror was administratively proper because he controlled the administration. The machine didn't malfunction. It functioned exactly as designed, just toward monstrous ends. And when he died, the system didn't die with him. It just found a new operator. Look at what came after. Nero burning Rome and using Christians as human torches. Domitian executing senators for looking at him wrong. Commodus forcing the Senate to watch him fight as a gladiator in the arena, literally making legislators applaud his combat performances. Elagabalus doing things so disturbing that even 2,000 years later, historians struggled to describe them in academic language. The blueprint remained. The machine kept evolving because Caligula revealed a truth about power that Rome could never unlearn when one person controls everything, when there's no separation between the person and the state. There's no mechanism to stop them short of assassination. No checks, no balances, no legal process, just waiting for them to die or killing them yourself. And even then the system just finds someone new to feed into the machinery. Ancient historian Suetonius wrote that Caligula made the best servant and the worst master. He learned tyranny by studying it from the inside, spent 6 years pretending to be the perfect, obedient subject, while actually absorbing every technique, every psychological tool, every method of control and cruelty that Tiberius employed. Then he perfected it, systematized it, turned it into something reproducible. That's the warning. That's the lesson that echoes across 2 millennia. The greatest threats to human dignity don't announce themselves with obviously evil manifestations. They learn, they adapt, they wear masks of loyalty and normalcy until the moment they don't need to anymore. There's one more thing. One final disturbing detail that casts everything into even darker shadow. After Claudius became emperor, he ordered most of Caligula's personal records destroyed. The correspondence, the administrative documents, the detailed ledgers burned. The official histories that survived were written by men like Suetonius and Tacitus, working decades later from fragments, memories, and rumors. Which means everything described here, the 5 phases, the systematic terror, the machine that's just what survived the purge. That's what remained after a deliberate attempt to erase the most disturbing details from history. Think about that. Imagine what we lost. Imagine what was so horrifying that even in an empire that regularly crucified thousands, that fed criminals to wild animals for entertainment, that turned human suffering into public spectacle, they decided some things needed to be erased from the historical record. What did those destroyed documents contain? What details were considered too dangerous to preserve? What techniques were deemed too effective to risk being studied by future tyrants? Caligula ruled Rome for 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. In that time, he constructed a machine that demonstrated to every subsequent dictator exactly how to break human beings, systematically, psychologically, completely. He showed how to turn normal human institutions into weapons of terror, how to make people complicit in their own degradation, how to destroy dignity while leaving bodies alive. And the blueprint never disappeared. It's still out there in the historical record, in the patterns of power that repeat across centuries and cultures. Every totalitarian regime that followed knowingly or unknowingly borrowed pages from Caligula's playbook. The show trials, the forced confessions, the making of victims into accomplices, the arbitrary violence designed to prevent prediction, the transformation of normal bureaucracy into machinery of oppression. All of it has echoes in that narrow corridor 2,000 years ago, where a high-ranking soldier finally had enough. The machine Caligula built lasted less than 4 years in his hands, but the knowledge of how to build it, the proof that it could work, the demonstration of exactly how far human systems could be perverted, that legacy is eternal, which leaves one final question hanging in the air unspoken, but impossible to ignore. If one man in less than 4 years could architect this level of systematic horror, using ancient technology and pre-industrial administration, what could someone with modern tools accomplish? What would Caligula's machine look like with computers, surveillance systems, algorithmic control, and the ability to monitor every citizen's every movement? The ancient Romans couldn't answer that question. Neither can we. But the fact that we have to ask it, that we're still trying to understand how one human being built the system, this effective at destroying the human spirit, suggests that Caligula's real victory wasn't in what he did to Rome. It was in proving that it could be done at all, that the machine could be built, that normal humans could be transformed into components of systematic cruelty just by adjusting the incentives and removing the safeguards. That's the horror that survived 2,000 years. Not the specific acts as terrible as they were, but the knowledge that somewhere in human social organization there's a design pattern for mechanized suffering. And once someone discovers it, once someone demonstrates that it works, that knowledge becomes part of the permanent human toolkit. Caligula died in that corridor in 41 AD. The machine he built outlived him by centuries. And in some form, in some corner of human civilization, it's still running today. The only question is whether we're living inside it, without realizing it, smiling and nodding at our own dinner parties, while something essential is slowly taken away.